So my name's Angel. I'm currently an associate attorney at Buchalter, which is a law firm here in LA with multiple offices up and down the coast. Um, I grew up here in LA, like right down the street or right down the hill from Dodger Stadium. Went to public school over here at LUSD, high school at Glendale USD, and undergrad San Diego, then to Boston University for law school, and now I came back to LA.
Nice, nice. So let's bring it back to the very beginning, Angel. Did you always want to become a lawyer? Is that something that was always placed in your heart, or was something that as you grew up, that's what you wanted to become?
It actually was something that was like on and off for me. I think like growing up, and I'm sure a lot of kids get this, and a lot of parents and adults tell this to their kids, but it's usually like with the more argumentative kids, let's say, and they're like, you like to argue a lot. You should become a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so everybody would tell me that growing up. And so it kind of stuck in my head. But I can't say for sure that growing up, like that's what I knew I wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
All I knew is that that's what people were telling me to do. I knew that I really liked watching Law and Order SVU on TV. I found it so interesting. And then I think once I once I was in undergrad and I was going to be graduating soon, I graduated a year early, and I didn't realize I was going to be able to do that. So the time came quickly where I'm like, oh shoot, what am I going to do
Yeah.
next? Am I going to pursue higher education? Am I going to go into the workforce? And even if I do, what am I going to do? And so I really had to like think hard about it. And I think as an econ major, I learned a lot about like costs and benefits and like what makes you happy and like utility, I guess, of
Hmm.
different life options that you choose. And so I thought about the lawyer path because that had been something that had came up in my life. And I thought like it was definitely something that I should consider, and I wanted to research heavily into it because studying economics, I knew it was going to be a lot of money, and it's something that I'd probably have to do for a while to kind of gain that back. And I wanted to make sure I was happy doing it.
Yeah.
And so after kind of looking into it and looking into, I guess, the different outcomes that could come out of law school, whether it was being a lawyer, being like an in-house counsel, or doing something that was adjacent to the law,
Hmm.
it was still something that really intrigued me just as somebody who really likes to follow rules, really likes to analyze things, really likes to argue too.
Yeah.
So it was something that I wanted to pursue, and that's how I decided to go to law school and be a lawyer.
Okay, so when you're growing up, like you said, it was watching SVU and telling other people telling you you're good at arguing, and you're like, okay, that might be a path that I might want to take. When you were in, let's say, high school, was there any educators that inspired you in that direction? Did you
You
have
know,
any
I
good? Let's just go this. Did you have any good teachers? Did you have any good teachers in high school?
I honestly I wouldn't say I did. Only in this, like, I had good teachers that really seem like they care about educating the class, and so in that respects they were all
Mm.
amazing teachers, but I wouldn't say I had any inspiring teachers, like ones that I could really connect with and that would ask me like, what do you want to do, what are your passions, what are your interests, and how can I help you get there, give you advice. So I wouldn't say say that I had that.
Okay, and then okay, so it wasn't the teachers. Teachers aren't inspiring you. They're good. You said they're good, but they're not inspiring you to pursue something, something big like that. How big did your family play a role in this?
I would say they played a really big role in the sense that they were always telling me just like if I wanted to do something, then go ahead and do it. Like they wouldn't like tell me that something was too hard, or they wouldn't tell me that I don't have enough experience to do this, or maybe I should do this instead. Like they were definitely very supportive. I
Hmm.
think they weren't guiding in the sense like they were telling me to be a lawyer because I made the joke about adults telling me as a kid I should be a lawyer, but I
Yeah.
think once I got to like that age where it's really my turn to decide, my parents have always been like giving the advice of you're going to do what you want to do and you're going to do it the way that you want to do it, and they didn't
Yeah.
want to influence me too much. They really wanted me to make my own decisions.
Yeah. and so they kind of let you do your own thing. And your let's go back with the parents. Your parents are first generation or second generation here? Is
It's
is it
a mix, I suppose.
it's a
So
mix
my
of both?
yeah, both my parents were born here, but their parents, one set was born in Mexico, and then the other set
Okay,
was born in Mexico. One was born here, so
yeah.
a little mix.
So you had a good family foundation. They guide you along the way. They gave you an opportunity to make your own decisions. And so how was high school for you when it came to your grades? So how were your grades in high school?
My grades were very good in high school. I don't or yeah, in middle school, my worst grade, I got a C in swim because I didn't like to swim. I didn't want to dress.
Yeah,
um, but once I entered high school, I really made it a point to just try to get the best grades I could, and I got all A's, and I ended up with over a 4.0 GPA. So I think it went really well for me.
yeah. So you had over a 4.0, um, and so you're deciding to go get your undergrad. And at this point right here, you're not sure whether or not you're going to pursue being a lawyer. You're just trying to get your undergrad, and you choose economics,
hmm
right? And so, um, when it comes to scholarships, did you apply for scholarships for?
I did apply for. I felt like it was a lot of scholarships, and it didn't really pan out for me. I didn't hear anything back or get anything, but
Yeah,
I would still like encourage people to apply because there's always they always say like there's so many scholarships available out there, and there definitely were. Like I didn't
yeah,
apply to every single thing I saw, and
yeah,
maybe if I did, I would have got something.
yeah. So you got some scholarships, maybe a few, maybe or none.
No, none from from
Wow.
applying. No, I didn't get
Yeah.
anything. Yeah, and then in undergrad, they I'm trying to think if like the undergrads offered me any scholarships. I think like some of the undergrads I applied to did offer
Mhm.
me some money, but the place that I ended up choosing, UCSD, they didn't offer me anything.
Yeah. And so you go to UCSD, and your major, you're confident it was economics. There wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna try this or that. It was economics. You're certain.
Yeah, kind of like the same thing. Honestly, like I think something that I've grown up with, and this was in undergrad and in law school. Like, I don't think just growing up, I had any real sense of like, I know this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay because I don't think a lot of people know that that's what they want to do. And some people do, and that's like awesome for them. But I think it's, one message that I want to push out there to like kids and just people in general is it's okay that you don't know for sure what you want to do and you have to take chances in life.
Yeah.
So yeah, so picking econ in undergrad, it was the same thing. Like I really had to research what I thought kind of interested me, and I really liked math, but I didn't want to get into math because it seemed like it was going to be a little too hard. And I really liked the practicality of econ and just like how I thought it could be applied
I do
coming
remember
out.
you're good at math, and I think that you had helped John. You
Yeah,
helped tutor John for a bit. My
yeah.
son John. So that's the same way with me. For me, when I was choosing my career, right, I was like, I liked working with kids. I didn't know what aspect I wanted. Like, that I want to be a teacher? I want to be a social worker? What did I want? I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was like, you know what? I like working with kids, and so let me get my degree in social work. And so I went out and I was like, okay, social work, maybe I want to be a social worker. And, I got my bachelor's degree in social work. And I remember I was working at this one group home, and this is what turned me off of this is why I didn't want to be a social worker. So I'm working at this one group home, and we're sitting in a circle meeting with all of the cottage kids, all the kids that live in this one cottage with a social worker, and we're discussing something. And then I remember one of the kids gets up and punches another kid in the circle. And then the way the social worker handled the situation, he was like, oh, stop that, sit down. And he continued with the conversation like it was no big deal. And I looked around and I was looking at everybody, and I was like, nobody's gonna say anything about that. Like, that was just like an everyday occurrence, and that's what you guys do here. And because of that one experience that turned me off, I was like, I can't be a social worker. If this is what this guy deals with and he's this ineffective, I don't know if I want this. And so that turned me off of being a social worker. But I did always know that I wanted to work with kids. I wanted to help kids. And so that was always put in me. And it sounds like you had some kind of idea, but you didn't know what exactly it was or whatever. And so, yeah, it sounds similar to what I was, my experience. So then after that, you get your uh, you get your 4 year degree, and then you have to make a decision, and you do it in 3 years.
Yeah.
You do it in 3 years, and you have to make a decision. And how did you make that decision? How did you make the decision to go to law school?
So I think, yeah, I briefly mentioned it earlier, but so I think I realized very quickly how I was going to graduate much earlier than I anticipated. And so I think, honestly, I think I applied to law school. This would have been like, I don't know, like 5 months before like applications were due. And that was also like around the time that I decided where I wanted to go, or that I wanted to go. And so when I was thinking like what I wanted to do with my life after undergrad, I was like, okay, like, do I want to pursue higher education? Because I think those are like, there's maybe two or three different paths you can take after undergrad. So it'd be higher education or like, another degree,
Hmm.
or just joining the workforce or take a break, as
Yeah.
I know some people do, go on a little break.
Hmm.
And I didn't really want to take a break. I think just the type of person I am is just I like to keep going and keep doing things.
Yeah.
Um, in addition to like me having no money to take a break, I
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
had to do something. And in terms of work, I knew that I always wanted to work for the county. I don't even know what I would have wanted to do, but I really admired like public service because I think that's what my dad and my
Yeah.
mom, I mean, sorry, my dad and my grandma
Hmm.
um, did and what I saw growing up. Or if, I wanted to pursue a higher degree, well, what could I really do? I guess I could pursue like a higher degree in economics, but I didn't really have a plan to what was I even going to use that for. I don't really want to
Yeah.
be an economist. I don't want to be a professor.
Yeah.
Could I be a doctor? I could, but that's never interested me. And so that's when I started thinking about the lawyer route because, as I said, like people had kind of joked with me about being a lawyer before. I was really interested in the law, like just from watching TV shows. But I
Hmm.
realized that that's not a good enough reason to go to law school, to like
Yeah.
invest your time, but also
Yeah.
your money because it's a lot of money. Um, so I had to look up, like what do lawyers do? How much does it cost? Like, what are the different options? Like, what if you go to law school and you don't want to be a lawyer? What are the outcomes?
Yeah.
And so I think seeing what lawyers do and like how heavily they do like analysis of different problems and like negotiating different deals or working with businesses or working in the courtroom, that still really intrigued me. And I think also reading about other people's experiences that even once you go to law school and coming out and deciding which group you want to be in as a lawyer,
Hmm.
that's also like heavily unknown, and that's kind of like you just land where you land and you hope that you like it unless you already happen to be doing something related to it. So that was the chance that I wanted to take.
When you
You
say what group you hope to land in, what do you mean by that?
So, as a practicing attorney, you are usually at a firm, right? And the firms have different practice groups. So, you
Hmm.
can be in like a corporate practice group, which is what I'm in right now, or you can be in a labor and employment group. So, they help like companies deal with like employee issues, let's say,
Hmm.
um, and different things like that. You can be a litigator, so you can be in the courtroom, and they have
Yeah.
different subgroups within that as well.
Okay. And so, okay, so you had to make all these decisions, right? And you're weighing the all the costs and the pros and the cons. I have one question about that. Did it like did you ever doubt yourself? Like, okay, I'm gonna go through this whole thing, and then what if I don't pass the bar? What if I don't pass this exam? Or what if they, did that ever cross your mind?
I doubted myself in the sense that I just wasn't sure where I was really going to end up because I knew
Hmm.
I was taking a chance. Nobody in my family had ever done this
Yeah.
before. Not only like being a lawyer, but just like pursuing like a higher education
Hmm.
degree. So that's where I did have some like I was scared. I was
Yeah.
scared about what was going to come through. In terms of like doubting myself about passing the bar or actually becoming a lawyer, I didn't, but only because I didn't realize how hard it was going to be going through law school and the bar. You
Yeah.
know, that was probably something I should have researched, and I know other people kind of did already. So I knew it was going to be hard, but I just didn't expect like how hard it was going to be.
So you decide that you weigh all the costs and you're like pros and cons. And you're like, okay, I'm going to law school, and this is the school that I'm gonna go to. And you start to go take classes. How different was it from your undergraduate? Was it
It
like,
was,
mhm.
yeah, it was very different. I think in undergrad, it could be compared honestly to like high school as much as like some high school teachers or some undergrad teachers wouldn't want that to be compared to. I would say it's pretty similar in the sense that like I think maybe especially like in public education, like sometimes the teachers just don't care.
Yeah.
In the sense that like it's really all up to you. Like I think in public education, some teachers cannot care because they're just fed up, and then but like in undergrad, it's more like they don't care because they know you're an adult now. Like you're
Yeah.
choosing to show up to class or not.
Yeah.
But in law school, I think the teachers care in the sense like they don't really care about you either, but they like to scare you. So they care about the way that they teach. They really want to challenge you. They
Yeah.
know that law school is supposed to be like this incredibly scary and challenging 3 years of your life.
Mhm.
Um, So there's that, and then they use like the Socratic method. So a lot of the lessons, it's just like asking you questions and making you really like think critically
Mhm.
about certain issues. Where in undergrad, it's mainly like here's a bunch of information, take notes, memorize it, take a test, and we'll be done.
Yeah. And so, what was the most difficult thing in law school? What would you say?
The most difficult thing I would say was, I mean, the classes of course were hard, but I think like emotionally and internally, it's mainly like being surrounded by people who you feel are like so much smarter than you. I think
Mm.
like this goes on throughout like I guess the entire like education of your life,
Yes.
but
Yes.
like you can be the smartest one in your elementary school. You go to middle school with many more kids. You're not really the smartest one. Now you're the second. You go to high
Mhm.
school with even more kids. Now you're like in the top 10. You go to really good undergrad. Now
Yeah.
you're like in the top 15%. You go to law school, it's like even more just smart people who are also number one in their class, let's say. So
Yeah.
now you're like in the 50th percentile.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty hard for me. Like I know that I am smart, whatever that means to you, but like I really compare myself to others, so like seeing my grades and then being like a B minus, like, well, everything's graded on a curve, so like these could be pretty good answers, but like they can't give me an A plus. Like only one person in that class
Yeah.
gets an A plus. So I think that was pretty hard on me, just to kind of get that understanding that I'm not going to be the top of the class anymore.
And from what I know about you, you're very competitive. I
Yeah.
feel like you're very competitive, and in your way, you are very competitive. I still remember when you blamed me for that one paper that I didn't grade, and the reason why you got whatever low grade on that was my fault. Right, very competitive. But uh, how did that play? That was going to class and you being that competitive and you seeing that you're not number one right here in this class. There's other people that are just as smart as you in that class. How was that rough? Was that
Yeah, it was really rough. And I think like it was also a learning experience because like it's obviously okay and it's like a given that you're not always going to be like number one, let's say, or even number two or number whatever.
yeah,
But I feel like when you're not used to that, as in like, I had always gotten really good
yeah,
grades like growing up in my life, um, you don't really know how to deal with that. I
yeah.
guess like you can take from other experiences, right? So like I also played softball,
Say
right? And like
softball, yeah.
my high school team was definitely not
You weren't
any
number
good there.
one. Your high school team wasn't number
Yeah.
one.
So like you can take experiences from that and like learn how to like cope and how to get by with these things, but it's still hard like when you just grow up like feeling a certain way and then all of a sudden you feel like you're not. But I think what I had to learn from that is that no, I'm still like smart and worthy.
Mhm.
It's just there's also a bunch of other amazing and talented people in the world who are gonna go on to also do really great things.
Yeah. Do you think that being competitive is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's good in the sense that it helped me keep going. So, some people did drop out of my law school and
Yeah.
people continue to drop out of law school. But I think because I was competitive, I wanted to keep trying and I wanted to at least finish because that was at least me being competitive with myself, telling
Yeah.
myself that I'm not going to quit. I think another reason why it was important is because I think being Latina, like, there's not a lot of Latino or Latina lawyers, I guess,
Right.
in the world. And so, like, who do you look up to see, like, oh, look, that person who looks like me, who has the same background as me, did it, so I can do it. So it's hard when you don't have like that role model in person to look up to, but I think me being competitive, like I didn't really care that I didn't have that person to look up to. And I was like, I'm just going to finish it anyway. And I'll be that person that somebody else is going to see and like use to keep going.
That's awesome. I'm extremely competitive myself. I'm very competitive, and in my mind, I always tell myself I can't lose. Like whatever I put my mind to, I just can't lose. So like whatever it is that I'm putting my mind to, whether it's being a teacher or being an assistant principal or dean or whatever I do, coaching a baseball team or whatever, we're not going to lose. We can't lose. We're just, and that has always kept me going. Like the fact that in my mind, like I don't care what the circumstances are, and I don't care if I don't have a role model, like you were saying, because I didn't have a role model. My parents didn't graduate from high school. I didn't have anybody that I knew that graduated, got their undergraduate, or went to higher education at all. And so I'm over here like, okay, I got to just keep going. And I had a family. I have kids, and I'm over here trying to just like, okay, I got my family. I don't have no role model, and I know what I want, and I just can't lose. I'm just gonna keep moving forward. I can't keep moving forward, and I feel like that's what you have too. Like in your mind, you were just like a powerhouse, and you just can't lose. Like you're just like, okay, whatever, this is what it is, and I'm just gonna keep moving forward, and I'm gonna figure it out. That's how I see it with. That's what I see in you. So you you're going through your law school, and you graduate, right? And you have to take the bar. Can you explain the bar?
Yeah. So the bar,
How much did you have to study for the bar?
oh, I wish I remembered this. But so as like a brief background, like for the bar, you can self-study or you can buy classes from some pretty popular companies that give like classes for people who, let's say, like aren't that like self-motivated to
Yeah.
study. And that's what most people do just
Mhm.
because it's so hard and so people are willing to spend the money. But the company that I took, they're called Bemis. And I think I forgot what the hours they recommended setting, but pretty much they said like you should treat it as a full-time job for, I think, like, I don't know, like 3 months,
Oh
because I think we
man.
stopped in June and then the bar was in November. So whatever that is, 4 months, you should treat it as a full-time job. So 40 hours a
Wow.
week is studying.
Wow.
So whatever that calculates to, that's
Yeah.
what I try to study.
Wow. And so, okay, you worked during when you had when you were in law school as well.
Yeah, I worked like at a theater
I
for a
remember that.
part-time job, and then I was also like a research assistant to one of the professors.
So you're in law school, you're working, and you're studying for the bar, and you're working, whatever. You're doing all that. All how did you do it?
Um,
How, yeah. How much sleep did you get?
yeah, I don't even remember how
Yeah.
much sleep did I get. I definitely remember feeling tired,
Yeah.
but I think for me, so this is going to be different for all people depending on like how sociable you are. But for me, I wouldn't go out too much. Like I'd probably go to my law school had like bar reviews on Thursday, which a bar review was not reviewing for the bar. It was you go to a bar with the
Yeah.
other law school students. So I would go to that on like Thursdays, but I really didn't like do too much else. But I do like to keep busy. So instead of like relaxing on a Friday night. I did enjoy like working at the theater, especially because I thought it was such like a disconnect from like
Yeah.
law school and law students and lawyerly people. You have to
Yeah.
like sometimes you have to act a certain way when you're in certain spaces. And I felt like working at the theater and just being around what I felt like were like normal people, it
Mm.
was like a nice break from that.
So you're studying for this bar and you're treating it like a job, and you're
Mhm.
studying 8 hours a day for 4 months. And when you're about to take that bar, how confident were you when you're about to take the bar? Did you feel like you studied enough?
I felt like I studied a lot. I I don't know if I'd say I felt like I studied a lot enough. I definitely felt like I could have studied much more than I did. But in the end, going into it, I wasn't confident. I really came out of it went in and came out of it feeling like it could go either way. Like if I didn't pass, I wouldn't be surprised, and if I did pass, I would actually be surprised.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I was. I think just like finding out how hard it was and like understanding like what the pass rates were, I just didn't feel confident, but I also didn't feel horrible about it.
Yeah. And what are the pass rates?
I think at the time that I took it, it was like 26% for like all across the board. They break it down differently, like so a lot of people take it 2 or 3 times. But I think on like for the people who take it just for their first time, I think the pass rate was about 26%.
And how about for Latinas?
Oh, I don't even know that.
Right. So let's just say it's a lot smaller than 26%, I'm gonna say.
hmm
So you take this test and it's a multiple days, correct?
Yeah, I think it's 2 days. It used to be 3 days, but then they shortened it to 2 days.
So you take it for 2 days, and then how long do you have to wait to get your results?
So I think when did I take it? Oh wait, no, I think I took it in July. Took it in
Okay.
July, and then I found out the results in November.
Okay. So a few months you wait, you're just waiting and you find out. And how do you read those? Do you just read on your own? Do you read with your dad and your mom? How do you do that?
I think when I got the email, I was at my house or at my apartment,
Yeah.
and so I had just recorded like or I FaceTimed with like my parents and I had
Yeah.
just shown them like the results. It was a little anticlimactic because it really is just like a button and then it pops up right there. Like there's nothing else. It just says
Yeah.
pass or didn't pass. And
Yeah. Okay. And how happy were they?
I think they were pretty happy.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
so.
they're pretty happy too, pretty proud. I remember they're
Yeah.
pretty proud, pretty happy, and that was an exciting moment. And so you pass the bar, and then what's the next step after that?
Yeah, so after that, it's pretty much you just go into. So usually you find out you take the bar in about July, and then most people would start their job in about October. That's when the people who typically go to firms. That's usually when their first year associates start in October.
Mm,
For me, my path was very different because I did not have anything lined up. So most people, or I wouldn't even say most people, but a lot of people, especially in my class, they had jobs lined up from since like January of that year
yeah.
or something, just because of the way um, it worked. As a side note, there's like private firms, there's like public service, like public defenders and city attorneys that you can go through. There's nonprofit work that you can do, and
Mm,
being at a top law school, they usually push like a big law private firm
mm,
path on you. And so those people in that path, they typically had something lined up already by like that January. So me, I didn't have anything lined up. It was a very hard time for me, I think,
yeah.
emotionally, just because like not only don't I have like anything lined up and all of my friends really do, but I'm also studying for the bar at that point. So I'm like going through all of this and thinking like, am I even gonna pass? Like, what's the
Yeah.
point of passing if I don't even have a job? Like, am I even gonna get a job? What am I gonna do? I keep applying like to all these places, not hearing back or just getting like pass, like move on, rejection type of letters. So it was hard for me, but that's typically what happens. Somebody has a job lined up and they start in like about October. For
Yeah.
me, I did not get an offer for a job until about September, maybe late August. And then I was going to start like a month and a half after that.
Okay. Okay. And so you get that job offer, and what type of lawyer what type of law do you want to get into? So I know you're in one area, but like, is that where you want to stay, or what type of law do you want to get into?
Yeah, it definitely is where I want to stay. So in law school, I ended up learning more about the different paths you can go to. So the two main groups, I guess you could say, is corporate law and then or transactional, not corporate, but like transactional, and there's litigation. So litigation, you think of people that are in the courtroom.
Yeah.
That's the SVU type of lifestyle that I had always dreamed of. And then in litigation, there's different groups. So you can do like white collar, right? Like with those like high class
Hmm.
criminals or something, or you
Yeah.
can do like criminal defense with like the city work and like
Hmm.
some misdemeanors or whatever. Um, and then the transactional side, you have the way I like to describe it is you're working more with like businesses and you're doing a lot of contracts and agreements. So I knew there was those two main paths. While I was in law school, I did a couple internships and externships in both areas that really helped me realize that I wanted to stay in the transactional side, mainly because litigation, I realized it's a lot of reading and writing,
Yeah.
which a lot of people in my law school are like, why would you come to law school if you don't like to read and write? Not to me, but they would say that, and I'd be like, oh, I do not like to read and write. So then, when I found out like what the transactional side was and like helping businesses and doing like agreements, it seemed like not only a lot easier, but just something that made me feel kind of like more important. I kind of like the idea of doing a little more like lucrative work with like bigger
Hmm.
companies and things like that. Um, and so I knew that I wanted to go the transactional route. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but a lot of people coming out of law school going to a big firm, they have to pick an area already, kind of before they even know really what it was. So
Hmm.
you have to kind of hope that they like what they're going to do, or else they have to pivot, which in these bigger law firms, it's a little hard to pivot. Like once you're in there, they kind of want you to stay there
Yeah.
unless they really have a need somewhere else. In like other places, like outside of the big law firms or like in the public sector, it's a little easier. But in these like bigger law firms, it is a little hard to pivot. So that's where I ended up. So when I got that job offer, it was strictly only to be in their capital markets practice group.
Hmm.
I had never done capital markets work, but I knew what it was, and it was like securities work, like public companies listed on like the stock market, which sounded really cool to me because I had kind of studied about the stock market in like
Yeah.
undergrad, and I was like, sounds like something I could do.
Yeah.
So I did it, and
Yeah.
I actually really liked it. So I lucked out, but I know there's people who don't like what they do, but it's kind of just too hard to move at that point.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's where you're at today. That's what you're doing right now. Correct.
Yeah, so today I'm doing, because I had changed firms, so I was first doing capital markets work, which is a little more like segregated and siloed work, and now I'm doing more general corporate, so that could include things like mergers and acquisitions of like certain companies or like venture capital, things like that.
So, what kind of advice would you give to a young person that wants to become a lawyer?
I would say
Don't do it. Don't be a lawyer. Is that what you're gonna say?
no, not at all. I would say
Good,
see
good.
it through. And I like really would not say that like specifically for the reason that I mentioned earlier, like and this is stuff that I was told. Like some people they didn't tell me don't do it, but like when I was kind of complaining about how hard it was more like, oh, like you can quit, like it's okay, like you can do something else, like you're gonna be fine, and they were trying to like console me to not feel bad, but I just didn't like that because like a lot of these people who are born into families that have lawyers, that have parents as doctors or whatever it is, like their families not telling them that,
No
like they
way.
have like we talked about role models, like they have that example to be like, it is hard, obviously we're going through it, but like my mom did it, my aunt did it, my cousin did it, you
Hmm.
know and so I don't want to like push that narrative of like, don't go to law school, like to a bunch of other like Latino or like people of color, just because I don't want them to quit
Yeah.
because they just can't, because people are telling them like it's okay. Like I want them to like push themselves and like just see it through and let it take them where it does.
That's good. So that would be it, to see it through, to keep pushing through and continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is g- good to know that you have that option available. Like, if you don't like it, if you actually don't like it, of course, like, don't finish it. Like I said, like, as an econ major, like, don't waste your time. Like, if you don't think you're gonna be happy doing it, but don't quit just because you think it's too hard. Like, see
Yeah.
it through.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Angel, thank you so much for sharing your journey of how you became a lawyer. I greatly appreciate your time, and you are an inspiration. In my mind, you're an inspiration. You're the probably I don't know lawyers, so I'm looking up to you. I don't know too many lawyers, and for me to see you, growing up and you making it through, and I know your dad, I know your mom, and I know how supportive they are. And for you to make it all the way into being a lawyer, that's pretty inspirational. And so, thank you again for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Of course, I was happy to share, and thank you so much for having me.